Look, thank you very much for inviting me here today, and I'd like to express my appreciation to all the speakers that have gone before and what I feel is a very extremely worthwhile initiative and a very opportune time too, given the recently changed political circumstances, the transition that we're witnessing as Nepal heads towards federalism, and the real opportunity for that connection between Nepali politics and Nepali people and the various constituencies there, whether it be business or the broader population. In terms of the Australian context, much has been said about Australia being an attractive destination for Nepalis to live, to work, to study. The Nepal Non-Resident Association in Australia estimates that there's more than 100,000 Nepalis currently living in Australia. And that there are now more than 30,000 Nepalis studying in Australia. And part of that, or behind that, I presume, is in terms of Nepali students, that attraction of an Australian qualification that's internationally transferable, and also I suppose a visa regime that enables students to support themselves while they work or while they study in Australia, but also to work for 2 years upon completion of their studies, which our hope is that they can then take that Australian qualification and those 2 years of work experience and then contribute back here with their qualification and their work experience, which will make them more attractive to employers, or provide them that know-how to be able to start their own business here in Nepal. Now, of those, there's always a certain percentage of Nepalis who decide that they want to actually stay in Australia, and that obviously feeds into conversations about Australia's contribution to Nepali brain drain. Though with 100,000 Nepalis living in Australia, I mean, that needs to be seen in the context of the 190,000 new migrants that Australia welcomes to Australia every year. Australia is a land of migration. Migration has underpinned our economic growth. It's underpinned our population growth. But Nepal is supporting Australia's growth, and we hope that in return we can also support Nepal's development as well. But the Nepali brain drain discussion, it's a useful one to have, but that conversation must be prepared to look genuinely at the factors driving Nepali migration, within which there are both push and pull factors. In the Australian context, for the attraction of Australia to Nepalis, the growing sense of community is one. The fact that we have a growing Nepali community within Australia is potentially a driver for further Nepali migration. The Nepali personality is probably also very well disposed to assimilating into Australian society. Our shared ethnic and cultural diversity, our love of good food and music, our shared appreciation of the great outdoors and the environment. Nepalis assimilate well into Australian society. However, the large pull factor, no doubt, is the economic opportunity. Australia has enjoyed 27 years of uninterrupted economic growth, the longest period of economic growth of any developed country, and largely derived from Australia's commitment to an open and inclusive economy and an open rules-based trading system. Our open trading systems have proven to be most effective in delivering sustained and inclusive economic growth and poverty reduction, which potentially is a lesson for Nepal going forward. Australia's open economy improves our competitiveness, generates more and better paying jobs, gives us access to new ideas and technology, supplements our pool of domestic savings and lowers prices for consumers. But to get there during the 1970s and 1980s, some very difficult political decisions had to be made along the way. And they included to abolish nearly all tariffs and quotas, to end subsidies to inefficient industries, to privatise most SOEs, and to institute a range of pro-competitive, pro-business regulations. Australia's path to reform was not easy, and we therefore recognise some of the challenges for Nepal. This brings us to the push factors. If people in this room were asked to consider some of the push factors for Nepalese to leave for Australia and elsewhere, no doubt some of the factors would be cultural, and there are very strong migration traditions here in Nepal. Underpinning this would be also perceived absence of economic opportunity, something that's been already raised, and whether through absence of infrastructure, access to finance, stifling regulatory environments or corruption are feeding some of those push factors. On the extremely positive side, the messaging from the new government has been very positive. Policies focused on jobs creation, private sector engagement, investment enabling environment, attraction of direct foreign investment, improving regional trade, national infrastructure development, and an anti-corruption drive. Now, all of these offer promise of expanding opportunities for Nepalese, both living here and those currently overseas who potentially could return. Underpinning this policy statement from the government is the promise of political stability that will enable sustained policy development and advocacy for the win-win opportunities of economic reforms in an environment where vested interests have typically focused on protecting their pieces of the pie rather than focusing on making that pie bigger. It's in our mutual interests to make sure that we grow the pie and increase everyone's share of the larger pie. Political stability in Nepal presents the opportunity for evidence-based and proven policies that those countries more open to trade grow faster and have been more successful in reducing poverty. The prospect for improved economic growth and national development occurs where trade liberalisation measures to leverage technological progress are accompanied by competitive and inclusive regulatory policies. So Nepal has the opportunity of 5 years of potential political stability to actually really put some meat on the bones of policies that are going to drive investment and trade and national development well into the future. So what is Australia doing? We are focused in addressing some of the issues facing Nepal's development. Through education, we have our awards program where we offer master's courses to Nepalese with the expectation that they'll return and use those qualifications and skills that they've learnt. In terms of encouraging their return, our award system actually requires them to return to Nepal. And having returned to Nepal too, we are supporting an alumni network so that they feel supported, and also providing them a platform where they can look at some of the issues facing Nepal and can feel that they are actively contributing to that. So we've had alumni groups that have organised women in leadership discussions, water resources management discussions. So applying directly what they have returned to Nepal with the qualifications they have to feel that their voice can provide a constructive support to Nepal's development going forward. In the livelihood space, we've had a long-standing micro-entrepreneur development program that's created 130,000 jobs over the last 10 to 15 years. We're currently in the process of transitioning our MEDEP program to the government system so the government can carry on that work. And in the interim, we're now looking at what we next can do in the livelihood space. Ways in which we can look at the small to medium enterprise sector, knowing that that will be a key engine to driving growth into the future. That's going to require further engagement from us with both the government and the private sector, and that recognises that donors and development assistance can only do so much. It's only when you engage the private sector that you're really going to get that drive and momentum. We're also doing or supporting through the Asia Foundation some subnational governance programs and analysis work. Last week we launched the Nepali National Survey, which is going to be an annual survey, and the idea behind that is to, at this very first step in the transition to federalism, what are some of the issues, what are some of the challenges, what are the people feeling, where do they see the priorities going forward? And we can, from year on year, start to map that, which will provide donors, the government, businesses, some really useful information in terms of, okay, how do we support Nepal's national development going forward? We work with a range of partners in that space, that nexus between water management, food security and development of agriculture and energy, to support the development of sustainable practices across all those areas, and in recognition that our aspirations should be to rebuild an agricultural sector that was once the food basket of the region, and see whether we can encourage development of that sector again, to improve the balance of trade and to ensure that we make rural communities that are not only going to survive but also thrive going forward and support those rural communities. We're also working with NGOs, non-government organisations. I was having a conversation last night with Dr. Sandra Ruitt. Again, that's an example of an NGO, the Tilgunga Hospital, with the Fred Hollows Foundation, that has now filled a very important niche in terms of eye care, and highlights that there is scope for the government to work with NGOs going forward to fill some of those capability gaps that still exist. Now, Australia will never be Nepal's largest donor, which is why we focus very much on partnership. And we hope that our work to support the government's priority of creating a firm foundation for Nepal's national development, the promise of economic opportunities underpinned by sustained and evidence-based policy making and budget commitment from the government, will begin to encourage Nepalis back to Nepal. Our experience with Nepalis in Australia is that they are great students at our institutions, and they are great workers, and they are wonderful entrepreneurs. So our hope is that working with business and the government, that we can start encouraging those Nepalis to return and contribute to the development of this wonderful country. Thank you.